10th, 2019 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. We're going to be doing hand votes tonight because the other voting system is down.
But I went through all this trouble to get up.
Well, you still have your agenda there, and I'm impressed that you already have it pulled up. So
I'll get with it too.
There you go. So that's item 3, reconvening. Item 4, public comment. Is there anyone who actually, the only thing other than the public hearings would be minutes. So if you have any comments regarding the items scheduled for public hearing, I would ask that you wait and make them then, but does anyone want to comment on the minutes, I guess? Seeing none, we will move on to item 5, the minutes. 5A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the November 12th, 2019 meeting. Does anyone have any changes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Landine.
Second.
A second by Commissioner Stevens. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Item 6, public hearing. 6A, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed rezoning from interim general business B2I to neighborhood business B2I to neighborhood business B1 or general business B2 for commercially developed areas of the Greatwood community. Area 1 is east of Crab River Road and north of Sandsbury Boulevard. Area 2, east side of Crab River Road and south of Sandsbury Boulevard from interim general business B2I to neighborhood business B1 or general business B2, approximately 16.5 acres in total. Myra.
Good evening. Before you see public hearing for Greatwood commercial areas off of Crab River Road and north and south of Sandsbury Boulevard. So this area up here north of Sandsbury Boulevard we're identifying as Area 1, and south of Sandsbury Boulevard we're identifying it as Area 2. This was part of the limited annexation back in 2008, so Interim's commercial zoning district was placed on these properties. It was fully annexed in 2017, 2 years ago, and the current zoning district for all of these properties is B2I. It is approximately 16 acres. Here is an aerial photograph of the areas. Again, this is an approximate location. It's not an exact rectangle, but it's this vacant area here, and it does like an L, and it goes all the way to Sandsbury Boulevard for Area 1, and then this is Area 2. So we did utilize the future land use plan map for our recommendation. Both areas are identified in the pink, and they are identified as neighborhood business areas. So again, this is to replace the temporary zoning district that is currently there, the B2I. This will not change any of the existing development or private deed restrictions. And the proposed categories that we are recommending tonight are based on the limited purpose annexation categories. We did take a look at those. We heavily looked into the land use plan and the goals, the future land use map, and the field investigation of the on-site properties. And this will also formalize the property owners' development rights. So for Area 1, we are proposing all of Area 1 to be B1. This is mainly due to the residential proximity and the properties that share boundary with the residential neighborhoods immediately adjacent to those commercial properties. The B1 is basically for small-scale limited impact retail businesses. It is compatible with the residential neighborhoods. In this zoning district, we do not allow any outside display storage. That is one of the characteristics of the zoning district, and it does have maximum square footages on some of the retail uses. One important item for Area 1 is that it will create legal non-conforming uses, specifically for the auto collision center that's already there, the auto repair center that's there, and a self-service car wash that's in the back of property that's immediately adjacent to residential. These uses are not allowed in the B1 zoning district, but again, our recommendation is mainly based due to achieving the land use plan goals, and that is to protect residential neighborhoods. So we do believe that the B1 zoning district is appropriate for these areas, for Area 1. It is important to note that the legal non-conforming land uses will be allowed to operate as is, so they will be grandfathered, and the grandfathered status will change when the land use changes, if it changes. So for Area 2, we are proposing 2 zoning districts. One is the B1, identified in the map, and that's for the retail center that's immediately adjacent to residential, and also a daycare site that backs up to the residential. And for the 2 properties that are off of Crab River Road, it's a gas station with convenience store and a auto-related land use. We are proposing B2 for those 2 properties. And we do believe that's appropriate in this case because it's surrounded by commercial properties. It's not immediately adjacent to residential properties. So I will go back to the map and show you. So again, this is a gas station and a convenience store, and this is a oil change place. So it's these 2 properties are surrounded by commercial properties, and so that's why we believe the B2 is appropriate in this case versus the other properties that are back up to residential that are auto-related uses. And so again, these 2 will be B1 because they share property lines with residential neighborhoods. So the daycare facility in Area 2, if it's greater than 15,000 square feet or requires an expansion in the future, they will be required to go through the conditional use permit process. Again, that's one of the things in the B2 that we have maximum square footages, and if it goes above that, then it has to go through the conditional use process so that we can take a further look at it and figure out if it's appropriate in that location. So then all the other land uses are permitted by right in the B1. The B2 properties will require a conditional use permit if they decide to redevelop the gas station with convenience store or the auto repair services. Those do require conditional use permits in the B2 zoning district, but they don't have to go through that now because they're already there. So that's just for future land uses. And of course, we also have the residential proximity CUP process that applies to properties that are zoned B1, B2, B1, and 1. In this case, will be the B1 properties that are share a property line with residential neighborhoods. So just some photographs of Area 1. So we have the auto repair center. Back here is the auto collision center. This is a dry cleaners retail center with restaurants. More of Area 1, we have a pharmacy there with a drive-through. We have our city's fire station. It's also part of this area. And then Area 2, some photographs of the auto repair facility, the daycare center, the retail center, and the gas station, the convenience store. So some initial points for the commission tonight. Graywood, commercial areas were again limited annexed in 2008, fully annexed in 2017. So now it's time to place permanent zoning on these properties. The proposal will create again some legal non-conforming legal conforming land uses. The recommendation is based, again, given the existing land uses and achieving the goals of the land use plan to protect single-family neighborhoods. The proposed zoning districts are based on the original limited purpose annexation categories, the land use plan, as well as the future land use map, and our field investigation of the existing characteristics of each property. The proposal is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan. So we did meet all the requirements of the public hearing. For the public hearing, We notified every commercial property owner as well as every property owner within 200 feet of these properties. We have been in contact with the Property Owners Association as well as the Homeowners Association. We did include, we went a step further and included a letter explaining what this means to the property owners and letting them know that some of the land uses will be legally non-conforming, so they are aware of that. And so the next steps for tonight is to hold the public hearing, followed by discussion and direction, and we do anticipate consideration and action on this item sometime in January. So I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you. I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who would like to come forward and speak on this matter. Okay. Have you filled out a speaker form, sir?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Go ahead and you'll have 3 minutes to speak, but when you get done, I'll ask you to sit down and fill out a form for us. Actually, we'll start just by stating your name and address for the record.
Right. My name is Chris Hillsman. I am the manager for the Collision Center and the Automotive Center that was up here in the photograph. I guess I'm just my question is what is classified, or I guess what is the definition of non-conforming legal status in this circumstance? So I kind of like to relay that information back to the people in the area just so we can know exactly what that means with that facility. So that's my question, really.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and we'll move on to review of and discussion on proposed rezoning from interim general business B2I to neighborhood business B1 or general business B2 for commercially developed areas of the Greatwood community, Area 1, east side of Crab River Road and north of Sandsbury Boulevard, Area 2, east side of Crab River Road and south of Sandsbury Boulevard from interim general business B2I to neighborhood business B1 or general business B2, approximately 16.5 acres in total. And Myra, I would start by asking for you to explain to the gentleman what a legal non-conforming use is and what the constraints would be as far as having that designation.
Legal non-conforming use or legal non-conforming building means a building, structure, condition, or use of land that does not comply with these zoning regulations, but lawfully existed immediately before it was annexed into the city and has since been in regular and continued existence or use. Land uses that are legally non-conforming are permitted to continue operating as is. Again, if the land use changes, then basically the grandfather status is no longer there. So
do you understand what that means? It's basically since you were there, you existed, and we're proposing to put a new zoning designation on it that doesn't allow you to be there any longer. You still have the right to stay there as long as you want to stay there as a legally non-conforming use. But if things change, you would not be able to expand, or there's some constraints that staff can explain more to you. But as you're existing now, you're grandfathered in and allowed to be there. Somebody new can't move in next to you and build the same kind of business with new zoning because it would not be allowed, but you would be a legally non-conforming use because you existed before the new zoning, proposed zoning would be put in place. And so I hope I'm explaining that clearly. I'll ask you just to come to the microphone.
What if the type of business changes from auto to something else? I mean, what happens?
It would have to be a conforming use. So if you decided to change, it would have to be a conforming use. If it was something that required a conditional use permit, you'd have to go through that process just like anyone else.
Okay. And I guess is there a list of the...
And staff Myra is a good resource for you, and she can probably help you out with that.
Okay.
And we're not voting on this tonight. We are just discussing it. So if you have any other comments, you'll have opportunities to come back and make your comments, or you can share them with staff and hopefully address them before we even come back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Myra? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Hi, I have a question. On Area 1, in the front area by the road, all that's going to be a B1. Is that because the building is conducive to B1 only and not B2? And all those businesses are already B1?
I'm sorry, let me get to the slide real quick. Could you repeat your question?
Yes, in Area 1, it seems like makes sense to have some B2s near the frontage road, but I guess it's because the buildings are not conducive to a B2. Is that why? Or are the businesses there already B1s?
The uses that are there along, are you referring to this area here?
Area 1, like E, F, H, J, and K.
E, F, J.
Because they're not adjacent to a residential area.
They're not. That's correct. So we're trying to carry out the vision of the land use map and the land use plan. This area is envisioned as a NAC, which is the Neighborhood Activity Center. And we believe that the uses already there are also permitted in the B1, and we believe that that zoning district applies to that area, or it's reasonable for that area.
Okay.
I was looking at,
Hang on just a second.
Yes, let me clarify what a NAC is a neighborhood commercial services. It's not a NAC, as I previously said. I got those confused.
So basically, it's being set up to provide services for the neighborhood and not as an center for the city.
Correct.
So, okay, does that answer your question,
It does,
Susan?
thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Andy, go ahead.
this is this is the first time I've seen in my short time a grandfathered non-conforming use. And so with that in mind, is this happening frequently, or do we have more of this condition in Greatwood?
We try our best to not create legally non-conforming uses. Again, this is a unique case. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. I don't see this happening again in the Greatwood area. I think this is one of the areas that we'll be seeing.
Okay, so this will be the only one, because we've already done a couple, and we haven't seen this one
Correct.
yet. Okay, thank you.
I mean, they may come up in time. It's hard to say. We've got a lot of them throughout the city, and they're fine. They're existing and they're fine. I believe, like the photography studio on Brook Street is a legally non-conforming use, and they've been there for how many years? Our billboards along 90 are legally non-conforming uses. And if they're damaged, they're allowed to repair them. If they're torn down, they're not allowed to rebuild them. You know, so, but we've got a lot of them and that have been grandfathered in. So, it just comes up. I don't know that staff can promise it won't come up.
Sure. No, this one's kind of interesting, though, because of the annexation part of it.
Right.
So that's the part that makes it a little concerning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Carl?
Myra, are
Yes.
all of these, this exhibit you got here, A, B, through P, are all of those separate recorded reserves?
Yes.
Then why can't we show spell out, I get confused with all this, where you've got all this stuff, I assume is probably going to be used in the ordinance. So why can't we say that A, in this case, is reserve A of plat recorded so-and-so, and you're zoning it, whatever, B1, and B is reserve, if those are all separate reserves, and you got separate legal descriptions, then there will never be any confusion about what that reserve is zoned. And this stuff in here, I can't, besides you left out a slide number on one, but B, that isn't my, and I had the same problem with the other.
And I think we tried, or at least attempt to address that on the second page, follow that map. We list out the plats and we say, this is A on the map, this is B and C on the map, and so on.
Just list A and call it out what it is, and call it the deal, and list B and call it out.
Some more detail to,
Exactly, and you can trace it right back to the plat. There will never be any discretion about, about
Discrepancy.
anyhow, about whether it's 6A. Here's one up here, Greatwood Tract 6A, C7C. And I go down here somewhere, and I was looking, and that refers to the replat of Greatwood C7C. Now, so it's really all over the board. And so I don't know why you can't just list A, reserve A of certain, whatever the plat title, and it's zoned B1.
we'll give another try
is
to try to address your concerns.
Reserve, whatever it is. I mean, every one of them's a separate reserve, correct?
It's a separate reserve, yes.
Platted-
There's a plat that has multiple reserves.
A platted separate reserve. And you can identify that, and anybody that wants to find that plat can go get the plat, and they got the legal description, and there's never any discretion, no difference. Nobody will ever get confused on where their zoning's at. That's my recommendation, that the way that you
Just to help
list it.
clarify.
We will try to add more detail to that, to the list.
Well, it should be very simple.
Thank you, Myra. Go ahead, Taylor, go ahead.
So, Myra, I had a question, and it's made potentially more relevant by the gentleman's comments. How is the land use change, that phrase? How is that defined?
So what we mean by that is the current land use is auto-related land use. So if somebody buys a property or leases a property and they want to do a doctor's office, that's a completely different land use.
Sure.
So
So let me just use this as a potential example. So you mentioned that there's the car wash on the properties. Let's say that car wash gets decommissioned and they want to store boats under the awning. Can they do that?
not in the B1. That's a land use that it's not allowed.
So basically, if it changes uses, it has to be allowed by right in the B1?
In the B1.
Or if it's a conditional use permit that is required, they have to go through that process?
Well, isn't it really because of the annexation? I mean, those people were there. And so you can't, correct me if I'm wrong, just because they were annexed now into the city and we decided we wanted to zone that B1, okay? And that use is not a conforming use in the B1. You can't tell them they got to tear down their building. You
And
see?
maybe we want to go in and put all residential. We
You know,
can't do
and so,
that. So-
No, I mean-
and so until that use that's there now can be there from now till eternity, as long as they keep using it. But if somebody comes in and changes the use, then they got to make it conforming to the B1 zoning. But you can't penalize the people that were there when you annexed it.
Sure, no.
That's the bottom line.
Totally understand that, and the grandfathering is obviously appropriate. Where my concern is that if someone makes I'll just say a modification to the business that's being conducted on that piece of ground, what rises to the level of a land use change?
Define modification.
Like,
That's exactly right. That's my point.
The modification would have to be allowed by right. If they're going to make some sort of a modification, but still be an auto collision center, but they want to add a little sandwich shop for people waiting, or just something, you have to look and see if that's allowed by right or not. So, I mean, you can't just say, we also now want to start storing boats or RVs or something. It has to be allowed by right if they're going to modify it all.
If I may, what if he wants to add another bay? What if he wants to sell it to me, and do I have to apply for, is that grandfather gone away at title change?
I don't think it has if you continue the use that's there.
So if I was to continue to use as an auto,
You can't
but I
expand
can't
it.
add a
I don't
bay,
think you can
I can't
expand
grow
it.
my business.
I don't
think
believe
you
you
can
can
change
expand
what's
it.
there.
Pardon me, we're going a little bit far afield here. If we can just try and keep it confined to this particular zoning issue on the agenda, perhaps it may be more appropriate for staff to answer some questions about grandfathering at a later time.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd also like to point out that it's specific to land use, not changing the name of the business. So, for example, if it's Joe's Collision Center and another owner buys it and changes the name to Bob's Collision Center, then that can happen. That's not what this is about. It's mainly about the land
As
use.
recommended by council, we'll wait, and if you would just kind of answer those questions ahead of the next meeting. But anyway, is there any other question or direction that you want to give to staff other than concerns about the legally non-conforming use? Does anyone have any other direction to provide for staff on this? Okay, so seeing none, we will move on now to item B, public hearing. And this is to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on proposed amendments to Chapters 2 and 5 of the Sugar Land Development Code to comply with House Bills 2439 and 3167 as passed by the 86th Texas Legislature. Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay, so we've had the opportunity to workshop this with you before, but we are coming back before you tonight for public hearing and seeking your consideration and action or recommendation to City Council on this item. And I'll go a little bit into detail about that, about kind of why we're looking at this more expedited schedule. But as you know, there were two laws that were passed during this last session related to development, House Bill 3167 and House Bill 2439. So 3167 has been referred to as the shot clock bill. It relates to processing and approving development applications, and then 2439 is related to regulating building materials and the city's ability to continue to do that. So both became effective September 1st, and we, in working with our legal department, have identified some amendments that are needed to Chapters 2, which is the zoning regulations chapter, and Chapter 5, the subdivision regulations chapter of our development code, in order to be compliant with the changes in law. We did have the opportunity to workshop this with you back in October, to kind of provide you an overview of the law changes and outline what our recommended approach was. At that time, we did receive positive feedback from you that we were on the right path. Most recently, we also workshopped this with City Council to give them an overview of the changes and the approach, and their direction was to proceed with the code amendment. So we are doing that. So just to quickly recap, 3167, it made changes to the development application and subdivision platting approval process. It now requires the approval that's taken of plans or plats to be within 30 days after the date the plan or plat is filed, so expanded the time clock, if you will, the shot clock provisions and what they apply to. It also expanded the actions that can be taken. We had approved before, but it also now expanded it to approve with conditions or disapprove with an explanation. For those conditions and any explanations or reasons, they must be citing regulations or requirements of state law, codes, requirements of the municipality. This bill also clarified the notice procedures for commission consideration of residential replats. They are now only required when a variance, so public hearing or notice requirements prior to commission action is only required now when a variance is needed. If there isn't a variance needed, then notification can happen after commission takes action. So in looking at kind of what the impacts were, largely our procedures, our timelines were complying with the time requirements that are outlined in the law. Once we deem something filed, then within 30 days, the item is before you, and that approval clock starts, and we bring the item to you. Again, it expanded the options for action to approve with conditions, or disapprove with reasons. And probably the item that's most related to you is that you must now cite the statute or code requirement that you are basing that condition or reason for disapproval. And those must be provided to the applicant in written statements so that they have a clear understanding of what those conditions or reasons are. So we also outlined previously, and just as a reminder, what our approach was. In the near term, we identified and likely that there were some code updates and then maybe some application handbook updates that we will be making at the administrative level. We were also going to be compiling that list of requirements so that you can reference that during your consideration of plats. We ask and appreciate the reiteration of contacting staff with any questions or comments that you may have prior to meetings, so that way we can confirm that we have code references in advance, so that we're not necessarily scrambling to find an appropriate reference for you to cite. And then looking a little bit longer, kind of midterm, I guess you could say, since we are already past the November-December timeframe for this year, but in next year and years forward, it may require some additional Planning and Zoning Commission meetings in November and December so that we can meet that 30-day time period once an application is deemed filed. But that would be on a case-by-case basis, so that's kind of just a heads up. Longer term, if there are conditions or reasons that are not outlined in the code requirements or our application handbook, we'd be working with you to identify those and bring forward any code requirements, code amendments that may be necessary. So looking specifically at the amendments to Chapter 5, we have added all of the action options for the general land plan process and plats. We've also added a consistent definition of filing date so that all of those, all of the plats now operate under a consistent definition of filing date. We've also clarified public hearing requirements for residential replats, so it's only required, so advance notice or notice prior to your action is only required if there's a variance that's being requested. And then we've added the procedures for notification after you take action on a residential replat. There were some other minor clarifications and modifications to be consistent with what we do in terms of titling administrative plats and the role that engineering plays in some of the plats. Looking now at House Bill 2439, again, this is the bill, now law, that identifies that cities can no longer regulate building materials that have been authorized by a national model code that has been approved or adopted within the last 3 code cycles. As of 2019, those last adopted code cycles were 2018, 2015, and 2012. We currently operate under the 2015 version of the national codes. We do have some local amendments, but overall, the bill outlined that there were some exceptions that cities could still have the ability to regulate building materials. There were very few that applied to the city, but we are taking an approach where if areas that are designated for historical, cultural, or architecturally significant areas which we typically see through our PD process, that would be one opportunity for us to continue to regulate building materials. So going forward, while for the most case for our non-residential uses in our BO, B1, and B2 zoning districts and residential zoning districts, we can no longer regulate those finishes. We do feel that we can continue to enforce the regulations that have been outlined in our planned development zoning districts, the mixed-use conservation district, as well as the Hill, if they are established as part of that district's requirements. These all we feel meet the intent, and we're all existing prior to the April 1st, 2019 time that was cited in the code, in the law, in the bill. And just as a side note, we overall as a city are in a fairly good position, and I know it may seem odd to be saying that, considering our authority has somewhat been limited. However, we do not have finish requirements for residential buildings in our residential zoning districts or our industrial zoning districts. Those were never established. There are many cities across the state that have very strict requirements, finish requirements, especially in their residential districts, and so they are now grappling with what they are going to do. But oddly enough, we do not have those, and so we are not grappling with the same issue for those areas. So overall, as we outlined back with you in October, our approach is somewhat aggressive in that we want to protect the city's best interest, and we believe the approach that we've outlined reflects the citizens' expectations for the high-quality development that we have in the city. So we'll be keeping the text in the development code, but adding some language to recognizing that these particular requirements in Article 10 are no longer enforceable due to the changes in state law. But if the law is ever repealed or deemed invalid by some court action, then they automatically will be reinstated and become enforceable. Again, we will continue to apply finish requirements for non-residential uses in our MUC district. Again, this is because this zoning district was established originally to preserve the local heritage of protecting the visual character of that area, and we feel that meets the intent of the law and some of the exceptions it allows. Going forward, we would continue to enforce existing PDs, so those that are already established and approved. And then for any new PDs, applicants would need to request as part of their application why this PD zoning designation is being requested to either establish historical, cultural, or architectural significance of the development. So looking specifically at the amendment, we've added the text clarifying the intent of a PD district, again, is to enhance the existing or create a new area within the city that will promote the city's historical, cultural, or architectural, character of that area, and that statement must now be included in a general development plan or a final development plan application. We've also added a section regarding voluntary compliance for the provisions or the building finish requirements that are outlined within Article 10, recognizing that the MUC and the HR1 Hill residential districts were established prior to April 1st in order to, again, protect and preserve that local heritage. But otherwise, regulations in that section are voluntary unless they are amended or repealed. So as I mentioned, initially, our goal is to wrap this up. There is some urgency in being able to get this information incorporated into the code, and so we've outlined somewhat of an aggressive schedule to have this amendment completed by early January. What that requires or would entail is both a public hearing for you tonight as well as your consideration and action of a recommendation to City Council. We have we have posted the opportunity to have a public hearing and first reading with the council in December, next week, in fact, at their December 17th meeting, obviously pending pending that, we would look for a second reading being anticipated at their first meeting in January. So tonight, this item is scheduled for a public hearing for you, as well as your consideration and action. Staff does recommend a recommendation of approval to the mayor and council for amendments to chapters 2 and 5 of the Development Code. Be happy to answer any questions following the public hearing.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who would like to come forward and speak on this matter. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and we will move on to consideration of an action on a recommendation of proposed amendments to Chapter 2 and 5 of the Sugar Land Development Code to comply with House Bills 2439 and 3167 as passed by the 86th Texas Legislature to the mayor and members of City Council. Does anyone have any questions for Lisa? Would someone like to make a motion? Was that you, Andy? Yes. Okay, and seconded, okay, by Commissioner Whatley. Is there any discussion? Okay, all of those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 7, reports. 7A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report to the City Council meeting on November 19th, 2019.
So that was me. That was November.
November, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. So the November meeting was a pretty exciting one. It had some of the best civic participation that I've seen in a long time. Still had a ton of mountain bikers that were there for their presentation and discussion on maintaining and building off-road trails throughout Sugar Land in conjunction with what they have going on. There were over 12 speakers. I was one of them, that spoke in favor of this and then even into further expansion of the Sugar Land's biking mobility. And then let you continue on with the next meeting where they voted to approve it, right?
Okay.
And but there was a great civic response to it. Everyone was very enthusiastic about it. Different groups from all over came out. And Lisa made a great presentation to council. Is she still here?
She is.
There she is. Okay. Yes, and Lisa made a great presentation to council.
So, okay, thank you very much, Andy. City Council meeting December 3rd, 2019. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you. That meeting, they did go ahead and approve the mountain biking proposal. They also had some recognitions. The city of Sugar Land was recognized as a 2019 digital city. So that was a great city. ABC 13 Eyewitness News Share Your Holidays Food Drive was also recognized. They had several consent agenda items that were considered and passed. But of particular interest to us, the workshop was held for 2439 and 3167, and they had some concerns about our, I think the commissioner's responsibility to learn and to understand the legal impact that we had with those bills, and we're anxious for us to learn more about them. They convened in the K room for a workshop, and they adjourned.
Okay, thank you very much. Item B, city staff report.
All right. This is it for 2019. Congratulations. Yes.
Thank you.
So, hope you have a great holiday. We will be back in 2020. I can't believe I just said that, but enjoy your holiday, enjoy your break, and we will see you, I believe January 14th is your next meeting. So, enjoy your break.
Thank you for everything. Thank you. You too, Lisa. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Carl. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Jay. All in favor? Aye. We're now adjourned.